The Hale residence stood like a picture in a glossy magazine spread. White fences, polished windows, and a neatly trimmed lawn that never seemed to grow out of place. Neighbors admired it almost as much as they admired the man who lived inside. Jonathan Hale was the kind of husband who drew attention without asking for it. Tall, confident, and quick with a smile, he shook hands with conviction and spoke with a warmth that made people lean in. At community gatherings, he was the one neighbors sought for advice. The man who remembered birthdays, who offered to fix broken fences, who seemed too good to be true. Beside him, Evelyn Hale radiated quiet grace. Her dark hair framed a delicate face, and her posture carried the elegance of someone raised to meet the world with poise. She laughed softly at his jokes, poured drinks for their guests, and moved through every social occasion as though choreographed. To onlookers, they weren't just a married couple. They were a vision of what marriage should be. And yet, for all their perfection, there were pauses too long between their glances. Smiles that lingered just a second too little. Moments when Evelyn's eyes seemed to drift far away, though her lips curved as expected. No one noticed these things, except perhaps Evelyn herself. Jonathan kept routines sharp. Morning runs, evening news, weekend dinners with neighbors. Evelyn played her part dutifully, but inside she often felt like a performer bound to a script she hadn't written. She admired the way people adored him. Yet in quiet hours she sensed a hollowness, as if the version of Jonathan that the world adored wasn't the one who sat across from her at their dinner table. She would lie awake some nights, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. To anyone else it was the sound of peace, but to her, it felt like the heavy reminder of a silence she could not explain. She wondered if this was marriage, the illusion of closeness that masks a gulf neither partner dares to name. Still, when dawn came, they wore their roles again. Jonathan kissed her cheek, Evelyn smiled, and the neighbors waved approvingly. Perfection was a costume neither dared take off, but costumes slip in the dark. And soon, Evelyn would begin to hear the first whispers that shattered the stage they had so carefully built. Evelyn had grown accustomed to the stillness of their home at night, the steady rhythm of Jonathan's breathing beside her, the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. But one night she awoke to silence. His side of the bed was empty, the sheets already cold. She padded softly into the hallway, robe pulled tight around her. From below came the faint sound of a voice, Jonathan's, low and deliberate, though not the warm tone he used in daylight. She crept to the edge of the staircase. "No, not now. She doesn't know," he whispered into the phone. Then a pause followed by the scrape of a chair. Evelyn darted back before he could see her. Moments later, Jonathan appeared in the hall, smiling faintly as though nothing had happened. "You're awake," he said gently, brushing her arm. "Couldn't sleep?" She forced a nod, but her chest tightened. The next morning, while folding his shirts, a slip of paper fell from his pocket, a hotel receipt, dated the same night he had claimed to work late. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she held it. She tucked it away, heart pounding, unsure whether to confront him. At dinner, she tried to sound casual. "You've been working late a lot." Jonathan barely looked up from his plate. "Clients. It's what they pay me for." Her throat tightened. "At a hotel?" His fork paused midair. For an instant, his eyes flashed sharp and cold. Then, just as quickly, he smiled, chuckling softly. "Evelyn, really? That's paranoia talking. It was a client dinner. The room was comped. Don't start imagining things." His voice was smooth, reasonable, and yet it cut deeper than anger. He made it sound as if she were the one who had crossed a line. By the end of the meal, Evelyn felt disoriented, as though her thoughts were betraying her. She stared at the receipt hidden in her apron pocket, now doubting the evidence her own eyes had seen. But the whispers continued. Some nights she woke to find him gone again, his voice carrying from behind a locked door, fragments of sentences that chilled her blood. She pressed her ear against the wood, catching phrases. "Finish soon and she won't suspect." Evelyn pulled back, shivering. The house around her felt colder, heavier, as though it carried secrets in its walls. She wanted to believe Jonathan, to believe the life they'd built was real, but the shadows after midnight whispered a different truth, one she could no longer ignore. The third night of Jonathan's late absences left Evelyn pacing their bedroom floor. The hotel receipt weighed like a stone in her apron pocket, the whispers she'd overheard echoing louder than reason. She had stayed silent long enough. When Jonathan came home, loosening his tie with his usual calm, she met him in the kitchen. The air was heavy with the smell of reheated stew, untouched on the table. "Where were you?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on him. He arched a brow. "Working again." Evelyn reached into her pocket and held up the crumpled receipt. "Then explain this. Explain why my husband spends nights in a hotel while I lie awake waiting." For the briefest moment, Jonathan's charm faltered. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing something raw. Then, just as quickly, his mask returned. He gave a cold laugh. "You've been snooping? Evelyn, do you hear yourself? You're imagining things, twisting scraps of paper into betrayal. This," he snatched the receipt from her hand, "means nothing." Her chest burned. "Don't lie to me. I heard you whispering, Jonathan. You think I don't notice, but I do." His hand slammed against the table. The sound rattled the silverware, made her flinch. His voice rose, stripped of patience. "Enough! I won't live with a paranoid wife who invents monsters in the dark. You should be grateful for the life I've given you." Evelyn staggered back, staring at him. The anger in his eyes was unfiltered, no longer softened for neighbors or friends. This was the man behind the charm, controlling, volatile, dangerous. Outside, a dog barked. Curtains shifted across the street, faint silhouettes pausing at the noise. But by morning they would dismiss it, the way people always did. Just a quarrel. Just marriage. Evelyn pressed against the counter, her breath shallow. "One day, Jonathan," she whispered, "the truth will come out." His expression smoothed like a blade wiped clean. He straightened his tie, a grotesque echo of calm. "Be careful what truth you think you're ready to hear." That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. And by the next morning, someone unexpected would come knocking at her door. The morning after their argument, Evelyn moved through the house with a heaviness she couldn't shake. Jonathan had left early, leaving only the faint scent of cologne behind him. The kitchen was still littered with the tension of the night before, the chair knocked askew, the air carrying the echo of his slammed fist. Seeking escape, Evelyn decided to walk through the neighborhood. The autumn wind bit at her skin, leaves scraping across the sidewalk. For a moment, she almost convinced herself the world outside was still ordinary. "Evelyn?" The voice stopped her cold. She turned, heart stumbling, and saw a man standing near the corner. His features were older, sharper, but familiarity struck her at once. Matthew Carter, the boy who had once been more than a friend, long before Jonathan entered her life. She hesitated. "Matthew?" He gave a small, almost disbelieving smile. "I didn't think I'd run into you here. You look the same." His eyes lingered, filled with something softer and something heavier. They walked together toward her house. Conversation stayed safe at first, brushing over years lost, until his voice lowered, edged with unease. "Evelyn, I need to ask, are you okay?" With him? His chin tilted slightly toward the Hale residence, gleaming too perfectly in the distance. Her pulse quickened. "Why would you ask that?" Matthew's jaw clenched. "Because I've heard things. Back in Boston before you married him, people went missing. Clients of his, neighbors. And whenever Jonathan's name came up, the story turned cold." "Too cold?" Evelyn stopped walking, shaking her head. "No, you don't know him. Jonathan's respected, admired. Everyone only sees what he wants them to see." Matthew interrupted, his tone urgent. "I'm telling you this because I still care. Just don't dismiss the signs." The words burrowed under her skin. She wanted to dismiss them, to chalk them up to bitterness or jealousy from years ago. Yet Matthew's warning fused with her own suspicions, with the receipts, the whispers, the violent crack in Jonathan's mask. "I have to go," she said abruptly, retreating toward her door. Matthew's eyes lingered, filled with a sadness that made her chest ache. Inside, Evelyn pressed her back against the door, trembling. The walls felt closer now, suffocating. If Matthew was right, then Jonathan's secrets weren't just infidelities or late-night lies. They were something far bloodier. And before long, she would stumble upon the proof herself. Sleep eluded Evelyn that night. She tossed beneath the covers, Jonathan's even breathing beside her, offering no comfort. The warning from Matthew replayed in her mind, twisting tighter with every remembered glance, every late-night whisper, every slip of Jonathan's mask. By midnight, she gave up on rest altogether. A faint creak drifted up from below. Evelyn froze, listening. Another sound followed, a drawer sliding shut, then the muted clang of metal against concrete. Jonathan wasn't in bed. Her chest tightened. Pulling on her robe, she crept into the hallway. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator, yet the basement door hung open. A dim light flickered from below. She hesitated, every instinct urging her back to safety, but her feet carried her down the steps. The air grew colder as she descended. The basement smelled faintly of bleach, sharp and acrid, but beneath it lurked something heavier, the copper tang of blood. At the bottom, she stopped. Tools lined the shelves, neatly arranged, but her gaze snagged on the trunk shoved against the far wall. Its lid was cracked open, fabric spilling out. Evelyn's pulse thundered. She moved closer, her breath shallow. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a heap of clothes, shirts, jackets, scarves. They were stiff, stained dark, some torn as though ripped in struggle. One sleeve bore a deep smear of red, unmistakable even in the dim light. Blood. So much blood. A gasp escaped her before she could stifle it. She staggered back, hand flying to her mouth, bile rising in her throat. Curiosity, a voice said softly from behind her, is dangerous, Evelyn. She spun. Jonathan stood at the base of the stairs, his expression calm, his eyes unreadable in the swinging bulb's glow. He didn't rush forward or try to explain in panic. Instead, he closed the trunk with deliberate ease as if sealing a box of old photographs. What is this? She whispered, her voice breaking. He tilted his head, studying her. Then, almost gently, it's not what it looks like. Evelyn's chest heaved. Blood-stained clothes in our basement? You expect me to believe? Jonathan stepped closer, voice steady. You see stains? I see evidence of justice. You don't understand yet, but you will. Everything I've done has been for us. His calmness chilled her more than anger could. He didn't flinch, didn't plead. He acted as though her discovery had been inevitable, as though the truth was simply another step in their marriage. Evelyn backed away, gripping the banister, her mind reeling. The perfect facade was gone. In its place stood a man she no longer recognized. And before dawn, Jonathan would tell her the kind of truth that would make sleep impossible forever. Evelyn hadn't realized how long she had been standing at the top of the basement stairs. Her legs trembled, her breath shallow, yet Jonathan's words echoed inside her. It's not what it looks like. But she had seen the stains. She had smelled the blood. Later that night, the house was lit only by a single candle Jonathan placed between them at the dining table. He sat calmly, as though this were simply another dinner conversation. His steady gaze pinned her in place, forcing her to listen. You need to understand, he began, voice low and deliberate. Those men weren't innocent. Every one of them was a predator. Liars, thieves, abusers. Men who deserved far worse than what they got. Evelyn gripped the edge of her chair. You're saying you killed them? Jonathan didn't flinch. He leaned forward, the candlelight casting half his face in shadow. Killed? That's the word the world would use. But I don't see it that way. I call it correction. I corrected what the law ignored. Her stomach nodded. You're justifying murder. He shook his head slowly, almost pitying. I'm justifying justice. The system fails, Evelyn. I step in where others won't. And because of me, women sleep safer, children walk freer. Without me, their monsters would still walk this earth. His conviction unsettled her more than anger ever could. He spoke not as a man confessing sin, but as one defending a noble cause. You make it sound righteous, she whispered. Jonathan's expression softened, almost tender. Because it is. Don't you see? Everything I've done to protect us. To protect you. You are the reason I fight. Without you, I would have no anchor. No purpose. For a fleeting, terrifying second, Evelyn almost believed him. The intensity in his eyes, the calm certainty in his tone. It carried a strange gravity. Part of her wanted to recoil, yet part of her felt caught in the pull of his dark conviction. But beneath that pull, fear coiled tighter. She wasn't his partner in justice. She was his witness, his prisoner. And if she ever turned against him, Would he see her as another correction? The candle flickered, casting shadows across the room. Evelyn stared into the flame, wondering if her life had already been consumed by his fire, and by morning she would learn just how impossible escape had become. The morning after Jonathan's chilling confession, Evelyn quietly resolved to leave. She rehearsed it in her head. She would pack a small bag, take cash from the drawer, and slip away before dawn. But when she went to the closet, her suitcase was gone. Every piece of luggage had vanished as if it had never existed. Downstairs, Jonathan sat at the table with his coffee, reading the paper. Without looking up, he said, "You won't find them. I had them moved." "Safer that way?" Evelyn froze, her heart thudding. "You planned this." He finally met her eyes, calm but sharp. "I planned for us. I know you, Evelyn. I know the way your mind runs when you're frightened. You think about escape, but where would you go? Who would believe you? Neighbors trust me. Friends admire me. You'd look hysterical, alone." Her knees weakened, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You can't trap me here." Jonathan leaned back, a faint smile on his lips. "I don't need to trap you. You'll stay because you know I'm right. Out there, you'd be vulnerable. In here, you're safe, protected." His voice was steady, reassuring, yet every word pressed on her like iron bars closing around her. She wanted to scream, but fear sealed her throat. Over the next days, his control tightened. Phone calls from friends went unanswered. Jonathan always seemed to intercept them. Invitations from neighbors were declined before she could respond. Even letters disappeared from the mailbox before she touched them. "You don't need anyone else," Jonathan told her one evening, slipping his arm around her shoulders as though they were any ordinary couple. "People bring noise, distraction, poison. But we, Evelyn, we're enough." She nodded faintly, but her reflection in the window betrayed her. Pale, hollow-eyed, whispering silently for help. The house, once her home, had become a cage. Every door felt locked, every wall listening. Jonathan's calm devotion wrapped tighter around her, twisting love into possession. And then one evening, the knock on the door shattered the silence. The knock at the door came just as twilight sank over the street. Evelyn startled, nearly dropping the glass she was drying. Jonathan looked up from the armchair, his expression unreadable. "I'll answer," he said, already rising. But Evelyn, driven by some instinct, stepped forward first. Her hand shook as she opened the door. A man in a plain suit stood beneath the porch light, his badge flashing faintly. "Mrs. Hale, Detective Harris, I'd like to ask you a few questions if I may." Before Evelyn could speak, Jonathan appeared behind her, his voice smooth as ever. "Questions?" "What about?" The detective's gaze moved between them, steady, probing. "A few disappearances in the area. Routine inquiries. Your husband's name came up more than once." Evelyn's stomach turned. Jonathan gave a soft laugh, shaking his head. "Disappearances? Detective, surely you don't think I'd be mixed up in something like that. Ask anyone in this neighborhood, I'm as boring as they come." But Harris didn't laugh. He began with casual questions. Jonathan's late nights, his clients, his travel records. With each one, Evelyn felt the air thicken. She wanted to speak, to scream the truth she had seen in the basement. But Jonathan's hand settled lightly on her shoulder, an affectionate gesture that burned like a warning. "She worries too much," Jonathan said smoothly, his thumb pressing gently against her collarbone. "Always has. Don't you, Evelyn?" Her throat tightened. She forced a nod. "Yes, I worry." The detective's eyes lingered on her as if reading the silence between her words. Finally, he slipped a card into her hand. "If you remember anything, Mrs. Hale, day or night, call me." His tone carried weight, as though he knew she already had something to remember. Jonathan escorted him out with a smile, closing the door firmly behind him. The moment the latch clicked, the smile vanished. He plucked the card from Evelyn's trembling hand, sliding it into his pocket. "We don't need outsiders meddling in our marriage," he said softly, almost tenderly. "Do you understand?" Evelyn lowered her eyes, but inside her mind screamed. Every question Harris asked had been a test, not just of Jonathan, but of her loyalty, and she had failed herself by staying silent. That night, as Jonathan slept soundly beside her, Evelyn stared at the ceiling, the detective's words replaying in her mind. Her chance had slipped through her fingers, but the fire of desperation was growing. Soon she would risk everything to reach out again. Evelyn waited until Jonathan left for his late meeting, before she dared to act. Her hands shook as she retrieved the phone she had hidden beneath the sofa cushion. The detective's card was gone, taken by Jonathan, but she had memorized the number. Her voice trembled as she whispered it into the receiver. "Detective Harris." "It's me, Evelyn Hale. I don't have long." "You were right. He's not who he seems." "Please," the front door creaked. Evelyn froze. Jonathan's footsteps crossed the threshold far earlier than expected. "Who are you talking to?" His voice was low, deceptively calm. The phone slipped from her hands, clattering against the hardwood. On the other end, Harris's muffled voice called out, "Mrs. Hale, hello?" Jonathan picked up the receiver, pressed the button, and ended the call. He set it down with deliberate gentleness, his eyes never leaving hers. "You betrayed me," he said quietly, like a father scolding a child. "After everything I've done for us," her chest heaved. "You've killed people, Jonathan. You've lied. You've trapped me here," the calm shattered. His hand slammed against the wall, the picture frames rattling. "I protected you. I gave you safety, a life better than anyone else could. And you throw it away?" Fear clawed at her, but desperation burned hotter. "Safety, you're a murderer." The words snapped whatever thread of control he had left. He lunged, grabbing her wrist, yanking her close. She fought back, clawing, shoving, her scream tearing through the house. In their struggle, her arm struck a candle perched on the sideboard. It toppled, igniting the curtains. Neither noticed at first. Jonathan pinned her against the wall, his face inches from hers. "If I lose you, I lose everything." Smoke curled between them. The fabric behind Jonathan burst into flame, heat spreading fast. Evelyn shoved him away, coughing as the fire roared to life. The living room filled with smoke, thick and suffocating. Jonathan turned, stunned by the inferno he hadn't meant to unleash. "Look what you've done!" he shouted, though it was his own grip that had toppled the candle. Evelyn stumbled toward the door, lungs burning, vision blurred. Jonathan reached for her again, but she shoved him hard, his body colliding with the mantel. Flames licked higher, devouring wood, crawling across the ceiling. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Neighbors had called for help. Evelyn burst out into the night air, collapsing on the grass, her chest heaving. Behind her, the house crackled, fire consuming every trace of their perfect facade. Through the orange glow, she saw Jonathan's silhouette framed in the window, his face twisted in rage and despair. "Evelyn!" His scream carried through the roar of the blaze. She turned away as the roof collapsed, sparks raining into the night sky. Their marriage, their lies, their carefully constructed world, all reduced to flames, and in the ashes the truth would finally be exposed. By dawn, the Hale residence was nothing but smoldering rubble. Firefighters sifted through charred beams while neighbors whispered behind fences, their faces pale with shock. To them, Jonathan Hale had been a pillar of the community, the man who waved from his porch and organized block parties. Now he was being pulled from the wreckage in handcuffs, soot staining his face, Louise burning with something wilder than the flames that had consumed his home. Evelyn sat wrapped in a blanket on the back of an ambulance, her body trembling though she wasn't cold. She watched as officers led Jonathan away, his head high, his mouth curved in a grim smile. He looked like a man wronged, not a man defeated. At the station, Detective Harris took her statement. Evelyn's voice cracked as she recounted the basement trunk, the whispers in the night, the gaslighting, and the confession Jonathan had laid bare by candlelight. Each word left her hollow, as though she were carving out pieces of herself to hand over to the law. Through the one-way glass, she saw Jonathan in the interrogation room. His cuffed hands rested calmly on the table. He spoke with conviction, not shame. "They call it murder," he told the detectives, his tone steady. "I call it balance. Every one of them deserved what they got. Thieves, liars, predators, all walking free because the law is weak. I gave justice where others were too afraid to act." He leaned forward, eyes alight. "I didn't kill for pleasure. I killed for principle. And if I hadn't been stopped, I would have saved countless more." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. To them, he sounded less like a criminal unraveling and more like a zealot preaching. His calmness was chilling. The same calm Evelyn had lived with day after day, mistaking it for love. When the verdict finally came weeks later, guilty on multiple counts, Evelyn sat in the courtroom, her face pale, her eyes empty. Jonathan's gaze found her one last time. There was no anger, no plea, only a knowing look, as though he believed some part of her understood him, perhaps even shared in his purpose. Outside, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about the murderous marriage. Evelyn said nothing. That night, alone in a borrowed apartment, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her words, when they finally came, were barely a whisper. "I loved a monster," she admitted, "and sometimes I wonder if that monster left a piece of himself in me. Because I stayed, because I believed him, because even now, a part of me still misses the man I thought he was." Her reflection blurred with tears. She turned off the light, sinking into silence. The documentary lens closed there, on a woman caught between grief and survival, haunted by love, and by the twisted truth she could never outrun.